Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And feel free to put your question and comments in the chat as we go. And I'll read them as we go. Hey Diraj, nice to see you here. So thank you and welcome to the Wellington Meetup. Your local meetup leaders, as you can see, we are a bunch. We host meetups across Auckland and Wellington. Joy and myself, we are the Wellington meetup leaders, whereas Yako and Pedro, as you might have met already, they are the solution engineers in our pre-sales team, and they host meetups in the Auckland area. So I am Ashna Patel. I'm a customer success architect at MuleSoft. Been with MuleSoft for roughly 1.5 years. And we're talking about MuleSoft products. I have been a MuleSoft developer before I joined, so do have some experience from there. And looking forward to getting to know you all. The agenda for today, we'll go through some announcements and some updates around MuleSoft products and features. The main topic is obviously measuring KPIs with Metrics Toolkit. So we'll talk about that, and I'll also show you around some sample dashboards. And I'll give some time for question and answer. So if you have any questions around the implementation, feel free to post them in the chat, and I will take them after the presentation and the demo. And lastly, I have a surprise giveaway, so stay tuned for that on how you can get one of those. So if you're joining the MuleSoft Meetup for the first time, the Wellington Meetup for the first time, feel free to drop in the chat and say hi. Let us know where you're from and where you work and what your role is. Okay, I've got a pretty tight agenda, so I'll make a start on the announcements. Meetups. We have got more than 25 virtual community meetups happening just alone in October. We've got new meetup groups where we are specifically looking for, which are geared to specific industries, for example, communication, media technology, higher education, and non-profit organizations. And we're looking for speakers, so do reach out to the MuleSoft community channel, or just anyone you know at MuleSoft, and they'll be able to put you in touch with the right person. We also have a lot of virtual events happening at the moment, so I guess make advantage of that and take advantage of that and join from anywhere you can. Shameless plug for Women Who Mule group. I'm also a meetup leader for the Women Who Mule group in the JPAC region, and we are going to have a meetup in November. So if you don't want to miss out on any of those events, feel free to join that, and you should be able to get those updates as well. Let me know in chat how many of you know about the MuleSoft hackathon. I would love to know how many people have already considered participating. No? Okay. So unfortunately, we are coming towards the end of the submission date. So this ran through most of October, and we are still open for submissions till 1st of November. And it's a great virtual platform to showcase your MuleSoft skills. There are 5 different categories based on industry, and you can basically have any innovative solution across any of those 5 categories. This is an opportunity to win awesome prizes. There is a lot of swag and a lot of cool things involved in those giveaways, so feel free to check those out. There's also some special trainings on offer. And you also get access to the MuleSoft community Slack channels where you can connect with other people from MuleSoft community, developers, and the MuleSoft folks as well. And there's also a mentorship program that you could join to help you create your best work. If you want to know more about the MuleSoft hackathon, which is still 3-4 days to go, I guess good enough time to spin up a nice solution in a weekend, do check out the DevPost website where we have posted the hackathon. There might also be links to the previous year's hackathon and the kind of solution people had. So feel free to check out and get some ideas from that as well. In terms of the product features, obviously we have released the Mule 4.4 runtime, which also comes with Studio 7.11 update. There are some improvements around the correlation handling. There's some improved logging and some data-driven enhancements on that as well. If you want to know more about those features, do check out the release note for the Mule runtime where you'll have the latest information. This had been a long-awaited feature, which has finally been released in September. So we now support the AWS Transit Gateway. For those of you who don't know, AWS Transit Gateway is a way that AWS allows you to connect to different the VPCs and also your on-prem systems using a more recommended approach by AWS. It also makes it easy for you to connect multiple VPCs together. So now MuleSoft supports the AWS Transit Gateway, and you can connect to your Cloud VPC through those AWS Transit Gateway that you might already have. And yeah, that's about it. We've got some new connectors and some enhancements to existing connectors. So if these particularly fancy, do check them out. There's release notes for each of those connectors and how you can use them. So there's more documentation on the MuleSoft website. Catalyst Knowledge Hub. I'm sure most of you who work with MuleSoft products will be aware of it. We recently launched the Catalyst Knowledge Hub 2.0, which is the revamped version of the previous one and with more added resources and I guess a more user-friendly website. And in just 3 months, we've got 52% of our customers who've started using the newer version. And if you haven't already, do check it out, what's available in the Catalyst Knowledge Hub. This is where you can find resources around best practices and sort of guidelines around how to set up, and mostly around the Catalyst framework that we have, or C4E and things like that you can find more information on. So feel free to check it out. We also had a updated version of Runtime Fabric. So that doesn't look right. Basically, what it does is it provides a flexible and native way to configure the ingress, of which you had to use config map before, but now it allows you to do that through a template, and you can create multiple templates, and then you can reuse those templates to basically configure your ingress. Makes it easy for self-managed Kubernetes, and this is also something that complements Cloud Hub, and it allows customers to host and manage the runtime plane themselves. Again, more information will be on the release notes, so do check it out. This was released in August, and it's been available for a couple of months now. Multi-factor authentication. I'm pretty sure you would have heard from someone at MuleSoft about configuring MFA for your organization. If you haven't already, do consider adding this, because this is enabling this is the most simplest and most effective way to prevent unauthorized access and to protect your data. So, and it's a quick and easy one. You just need to check off the button, and that would basically enforce it to all of your customers, all of your users, sorry, of the endpoint platform already. Friends of Mex. These are bite-sized videos that likes of me, customer success architects and solution engineers at MuleSoft create, based on the kind of conversations we have with our customers and the kind of questions we answer more frequently. So we decided to create videos around those, and these are available on the Friends of Mex website. If you just Google for Friends of Mex, that should land you to the MuleSoft page, and do check out some of these videos. A lot of these are demos. A lot of these are just overview or talking about a concept. So if you have 5 minutes and you want to understand something that you haven't worked with before, I think this is a great way to sort of get into the topic. And do let us know if you like these and if you find these interesting. We do try and make them more entertaining, I guess. So make sure you give your feedback on the MuleSoft community channels. All right, so that was the end of the announcement. With this, we're going to jump into the actual Metrics Toolkit. I'm getting a message saying my internet connection is unstable. If you guys can still hear me, could someone please let me know in the chat? Okay, cool. Thanks, Suresh. All right, so you all are here to know about how to measure KPIs with Metrics Toolkit. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have looked at Metrics Toolkit or have already played around with or have heard of it before in your conversation? Just let me know in the chat. Yep. Yes, I was the one who told you yes. Okay. Looks like majority of us don't know. So we'll start with Scratch. start from scratch. We'll cover a few different things on this. So we'll talk about KPIs, metrics, and the different categories for different personas, the kind of KPIs they would be interested in. What is Metrics Toolkit and how it works? The available metrics categories on Metrics Toolkit, and it's an extendable application. So how do you actually extend it? How do you make it your own? Considerations for using Metrics Toolkit, and we'll also look at some sample KPI dashboards. So with that, we'll jump into the okay. So from a basic metric to a KPI, we'll also talk about what those KPIs and metrics connect. So KPI usually connects with your business objective or a quantifiable value of your business objective or business goal. So for example, you might have business objectives around, or your company might have business objectives around cost reduction or efficient operations or customer growth. So how do you actually measure these things? So there should be a KPI associated with it that tells you that, okay, so if you're looking at reducing cost, for example, then you might have KPIs around how much saving have you done from operations, how much saving have you done from development, or how much savings have you done from introducing any new tools or platforms and things like that. So these are the KPIs, then that is something that the business would be interested in. And metric is a quantifiable value that measures an aspect of one of those KPIs. So a KPI can be made up of multiple metrics, but it's not the other way around. The metrics almost always refers to just one KPI that can represent. And it's always a good idea to base a KPI on multiple metrics rather than one. So for example, when you say the savings from operations, so you want to look at how much was saving in terms of time, how much saving was in terms of cost, but how much was the productivity or how many defects and things like that. So it puts things in context for you to understand what the actual impact of that KPI is, right? And the way KPIs and metrics works is that from the platform, you would be able to get some simple metrics. So for example, if you look at the one on the screen, so for example, you're able to get something like number of assets in your exchange as a simple metric out of the platform API, right? And then you can divide that into different types. So you can say out of the 40 assets we've got, there is 25% of those are applications, 40% of those are API specs, and there is other bits which contribute to the rest of the percentage. And then you can do a timeline on what those assets have been like. So you can say that, okay, this was the number of applications was somewhere between 15 3 months ago, and now it has been 25. So that kind of shows you, okay, how much these assets have increased over a certain project or a certain time period, and how much is the contribution by a certain business group or a certain team. And you can look at those timelines and you can sort of derive some sort of KPI measurements out of it. So in this particular example, for it could, if you look at these graphs, you could potentially derive that the platform growth has been going up. So API publication growth rate, for example, has been 65% per quarter. Or you can say the platform adoption is by using API fragment reuse, you can say it's gone up 10% per quarter. So you already have this data available as part of this platform, right? But putting them together on a dashboard and creating that timeline or the time series data out of it gives you the insights into how this is looking or how this is sort of working in conjunctions with your business goals or business objective and the way you are doing your projects. So hopefully it gives you that kind of knowledge that you can then use to make informed decisions about your projects and the direction you're going in. So different mapping KPI categories with metrics and personas. So different personas would be interested in different types of metrics, right? So for example, if you look at the platform owners or the platform architect who are responsible for the entire MuleSoft platform, they would be interested in something like, okay, how many codes do we have allocated and how many of those are available? How many API specs are published and how many of those are actually implemented? How many API specs are actually implemented? How many API calls you have per environment per business group, or how many active versus inactive users you have? This is kind of what gives you the understanding of what your platform demand is or what your platform growth is looking like. Number of active users or versus number of inactive users gives you a really good idea of how much your platform is being adopted by different teams if you have multiple business teams or business units using MuleSoft platform as well. If you are into the security team or enablement team, you might be interested in more about the organization enablement. You might also be interested in making sure that your API is actually secured with policies. So you can see things like how many APIs do we have without policies, how many APIs we have with or without security policies, how many API instances are deployed but are active and inactive, and how many applications are active versus inactive. When we say API instance in an application, it basically means the difference between the API proxy and the actual API endpoints, for example, when we deploy it on CloudTel. So that's the difference between those two. There's another category, which is API consumption and reuse. The personas that would be interested in this would be the developers, architects, the people who are working very closely on those specific APIs or group of APIs. They would be more interested in seeing, okay, how many API instances we have that have contracts. API instances with contracts basically means how many consumers you have that have registered to use that application instance, how many API clients you have, how many fragments are being reused, how many specs are being reused, and how many of those specs are being managed in API Manager. So basically a lot more around the API management side of things and a lot of around the reuse of how your APIs are being reused as well. Does this kind of resonate with you all? Like, is this something that you would see being measured in your own organizations as well? Any thoughts on this? Any comments? Feel free to post this in chat. So with that bit of a background around how we measure those KPIs and where this comes in, I introduced Metrics Toolkit. It's an extensible Mule4 application, which is intended to collect, aggregate, and load metrics into different visualization systems. And it provides the out-of-the-box integration and visualization options. I'll break down each of those parts. There's a bit of information there. But essentially, what Metrics Toolkit is, as I said, it's a Mule4 application. It's a single application, and it provides more than 120 metrics from 3 different domains. So what are these domains? The main chunk of metrics that you get out of Metrics Toolkit are around platform operational metrics. Do keep in mind, these are platform level metrics. So things like number of users, how many Exchange assets you have, how many apps you have deployed on Runtime Manager, how many VPCs, how many vCores, and things like that at the platform level. So if you have different business groups, you'll be able to see information for each of those business group, breakdown across those business groups and environment as well. But it's meant to have that very high-level platform overview, which you might not be able to do at the moment. You might have to go in and check a few different things to figure out how many vCores you have available and things like that. So it gives you information from a lot of different platform components. So for example, Runtime Manager, Exchange, Design Center, Access Management, all of these components have their own platform APIs, and Metrics Toolkit uses those platform APIs to gather that information and present it in a more cohesive way. Excuse me. The second category is platform benefits. This focuses around the savings that we talked about. So for example, if you want to showcase how much business value you're deriving out of using the MuleSoft platform, you can say it gives you information around what's the developer productivity has been, how much total savings have you had by reusing APIs, how much savings you've had by maintenance productivity, because you're not maintaining any custom code, but you're maintaining APIs which are much more simplified and structured and reduces that maintenance time. It does require a bit of input from you to calculate those final metrics, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But this is something very interesting, and it really helps our customers basically derive or sort of talk about the value that they're getting out of the MuleSoft platform. Sometimes it's not that easy to sort of showcase this, but these platform benefits metrics make it, they give you a good start to sort of start that conversation, and then you can sort of refine it and make it your own in terms of what exactly you want to capture as part of those metrics. And the third category, which might be interesting to a lot of you, is the external SDLC metrics. So at the moment, I guess you have no way of sort of consolidating all of this in one place from MuleSoft perspective. So you have your endpoint monitoring dashboards, you have your you might have, if you're on RTF, you might have your Ops Center dashboards, and you might have information in other things where you're aggregating, for example, in Splunk or Elk or things like that. But if you're really trying to gather your metrics around your entire SDLC, so for example, how many Jira tickets you've had, how many Jira tickets you've sort of closed in the last month, how many Confluence documentations you've created, how many Jenkins job failed versus successful, how many new jobs created, how many Bitbucket repositories you had, and how many of those had updates in last month, and things like that. You can collect these kind of metrics based on. So we've given you connectors for some of those, and it gives you an idea of how to connect to the ones listed on here. And then you can extend it to sort of connect it to any other SDLC tools you might be using, and have like an API that you can connect through from a Mule application. And you should be able to gather those metrics together. This is useful if you're trying to sort of portray that end-to-end value of, or your development productivity. For example, that could be a dashboard of its own, and all of these metrics would be an important measure in that particular dashboard. Again, these are different modules, so you can choose to just have, for example, platform operational metrics. You don't need to go for SDLC metrics if you don't want to, for example. So that's the metrics coming out of the toolkit. In terms of using the application, it runs in two different modes. So you can either use it as a polar mode, so the application runs and basically collects the metrics and loads them at a regular interval, whatever frequency you decide. So it runs on a scheduler, so you can say every morning 9 a.m. I want these dashboards to be loaded on Splunk, or I don't know, every Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening you can run it. Weekly, I guess, is a good frequency because the kind of information it's collecting is not expected to change pretty much every day. I think weekly would be a good frequency, but again, you can, depending on your particular requirement, you can just use the cron scheduler to basically just pick a frequency that works for you. Or the other option is you can also use it as a REST API. So it does have configuration to basically call the endpoints as a REST API. So for example, if you're only interested in access management stats, so you can say, hey, give me access management metrics only, and it will be able to give you that as and when you ask for it. That will be the snapshot of that particular component or metrics for that particular time. So you can say whenever you want to, for example, if you want latest dashboard, whenever you open the application, you can just configure so that it makes an API call and fetches the latest information rather than having that weekly upload. So it's up to you how you want to configure it. In terms of visualization option, this is quite a lot of work in progress. So the team who has developed this application keep adding more visualization options as we see customers sort of asking for those options. So we started with CSV, JSON, and Splunk, and then we added the Kibana dashboards. We also have the option of, if you have Titanium, you also have the option of loading these into your endpoint monitoring using custom metrics connector. So that's one option. Splunk and Elk, we have got some pre-made dashboards, so you can basically just connect and start using those dashboards. Or if you like, you can then sort of modify and customize those dashboards as you would seem fit. We also have what's not noted on here. We also have Tableau dashboards now, so you can just basically look at what those could look like and then modify them as you go. As you can see, it's created by MuleSoft Professional Services. This was created while they were working with specific customers, but then they thought this is sort of generic enough that all of the customers would benefit. So then this had been made available to all customers as a free, extensible open source application. It's available on GitHub, and you can just go and search for Metrics Toolkit, and the GitHub link should appear. But if not, then here's the link to sort of go and check it out. And the GitHub page actually has a lot of documentation as well. So that's where I would go for the latest documentation, how to sort of install this application and the steps to follow to set up those dashboards as well. In terms of the conceptual design, so the way the application works is basically it calls the endpoint platform APIs or the SDLC metrics if you choose to enable those. It will call those platform APIs and the other APIs and collect the information. It will collect some simple metrics, it will collect some, and then it will create some aggregated metrics out of it. So it's like, for example, if you had just number of assets, then it would sort of add it by type. It will also add the dimension of per business group, per environment, and things like that. And then it will allow you the option to load into all the different targets that you see here. So you can pick which one you want to basically output in. So for example, if you choose Splunk, it will be able to upload the metrics information into Splunk dashboards as you have configured the Splunk dashboards to work. Or it could be MongoDB. You might want to store it in a database before you put it into another system. For example, if you want to connect it with Power BI, or you could just take, for example, a CSV output and put it in Power BI every now and then to sort of visualize those dashboards as well. So there are different options on how you want to configure it. But and they keep adding more to this, so feel free to sort of keep an eye on the GitHub page to see what's latest on this. By the way, if you have any questions around how this works or anything, feel free to post in chat. I will come to your questions at the end. The different types of metrics. So this is kind of just going a little bit more in detail about the three categories that we talked about. So the first one is the platform operational metrics. As I said, there is different components, and we get the metrics from all of those using the platform APIs. So for example, if you talk about the access management metrics, the kind of metrics you'll get is like total number of users, total number of environments, API client application. If you look at API manager, you'll have API instances, how many of those have more than one consumer, how many of those are using automated policies and things like that. Runtime manager, you'll be able to see the vCores and applications and also the different runtime versions used if you're on cloud type. So obviously in cloud type, you have the option of using different runtime versions as you go. So if you are trying to consolidate, or if you're trying to just keep a track of how many applications you have, for example, on 4.3 versus how many you have on 3.9, you should be able to do that using these dashboards. And the configuration allows you to enable or disable different metric groupings. So for example, if you're not using Anypoint MQ, there's no reason for you to fetch those metrics. It won't bring anything back anyway. Well, you can disable so it doesn't even make those in API calls. So you can sort of play around with it. And this is all part of the application properties file. So you can just configure there which one you want to use. This is the platform benefits metrics that I was talking about. I also mentioned that it requires a bit of a manual input to sort of calculate those metrics. So as you can see on the left-hand side, those are the manual inputs that you would need to provide. So for example, the API development historical time, how much time did you take to develop APIs before you started using MuleSoft platform versus how much time it takes for you to do that right now. Same API maintenance time, historical versus current, and also what's your developer day rate. This could help you sort of calculate in dollar value, the platform benefits. So developer productivity, savings from API reuse, savings from maintenance productivity, and things like that. Again, this is an indicative number, and the formula for deriving this is in open source, so you can go and check out in GitHub what the formula is being used behind this. You can obviously modify it, refine it so that it makes sense for your organization. But it's supposed to give you that starting point of how much value you can sort of derive from this, or how much business value does it actually translate to. As I said, those conversations could be a little bit tricky sometimes because these are not very direct sort of outputs, right? So those indirect values sort of get lost, and this is meant to give you that starting point of that conversation of how you're getting value out of the platform and things like that. Okay, and the last one, again, these are optional, so you may not choose to load these metrics, but if you do, there is different SDLC components that you can pull the metrics from. So I've just given some examples of, for example, if you look at Jira, there is total number of Jira stories in your backlog, how many stories were in the current sprint, how many of those are carried, and then you can categorize them by type and associated count in the current sprint and things like that. So again, if you are just if your organization is using Jira and to sort of look at how much volume you've had and how much sort of productivity you've had and how many defects, for example, and product-wise or project-wise, if you're tracking those things, this might be a good way to sort of consolidate those things together along with your APIs metrics, which is coming from MuleSoft, and might be useful to have those on one sort of dashboard to be able to correlate them. All right. Getting started with Metrics Toolkit. So how do you go about it? You download the application from GitHub, and follow the instructions that are on GitHub page to configure the properties and run the application. I do recommend to run the application just as it is for the first go. And once you've got the application working and you can sort of see either the embedded dashboard that you go for, or if you just load it in Splunk or whatever, just CSV or JSON output even. Just see what comes back once you've connected it with your org ID and the platform credentials, and see what you're able to get back. Once you've got that working, then you can sort of go about making those changes and sort of enhancing it so that it gives you a bit more customized version of those metrics. There's a Postman collection that is provided as part of the source code, and that also gives you those restaurant points. So Polar, if you don't want to try in the Polar mode first, you can try the API one and see what comes back. For example, when you ask for Exchange, or when you ask for Access Management or Runtime Manager or SDLC, and what comes back, and sort of look at that JSON response. And once you're able to make sense of that data and how that would be translated, you can then sort of modify it. There are also steps defined for following the loading the dashboards. So, for example, if you want to do Splunk dashboards or Kibana dashboards or Tableau, so there are steps on there on how you can configure those for your instance, and how you can connect, and what those properties you need to define and things like that. Once you have those pre-configured dashboards, then you can sort of look at how the metrics are being loaded, whether that makes sense. Sometimes you might not have your business group specified correctly. You might not have the right permissions, for example, for the platform user that you used to get those metrics. And so to work out those kinks, I guess, just make sure that you get it working first and you're able to get the data first, and then make any changes you want to the application. Yeah, so this is kind of like the next step from it. So once you have got the application working and sort of in its vanilla version, you can then identify which metrics categories you are most interested in. For example, you might not decide to do SDLC as the MVP, and then you can just decide to do the platform metrics or the benefits, and so just enable those. You create the dashboards for each of the persona. So it's a good idea to have those because, as I said, like they'll be interested in very specific things. For example, if you're from operations perspective, or if you're looking at from a platform owner or product owner perspective, you'll be interested in different kind of metrics. So make sure that you create the dashboards to address those needs and sort of that relevant information on that one dashboard. Pick a suitable frequency. So as I said, daily, weekly, monthly, or however frequently you want to. A good idea is to do a weekly one, as I said, or even daily if you don't have that many, I guess, applications. You can update it more frequently. Configure the application to the platform credentials, your org IDs. You can also, for example, if you have multiple business groups, you don't have to gather data for all of them. You might only be interested in the business group that you belong to. Excuse me. So in that case, you can just there's an allow list and there's a deny list. So you can just put those business groups in the ignored list, sorry, not deny list, ignored list. And so it doesn't bring data back for those business groups, only the one you're interested in. You deploy to a Mule runtime. Now, I forgot to mention, this doesn't require to be deployed to production. So you don't need to use a production vCore for this. You can deploy to your dev environment, your test environment, wherever you have a 0.1 vCore lying around. Or you could just deploy to your local machine if you're sort of short on your vCores. It just needs to be able to connect to your platform by using a valid credentials and your endpoint platform org ID. So as long as you have configured this and as long as it has the right permissions to read those metrics, it should be able to bring the data back to you. And lastly, just validate that the value you're getting back correlates with your actual. So sometimes if that's not configured correctly, it might be pulling data from just one business group rather than getting it from all of them or just one environment and things like that. So make sure that it correlates with what you have in your endpoint platform and it looks correct before you sort of make any other changes. All right. Lastly, some consideration around how to use Metrics Toolkit. So for larger accounts, if you have like huge number of business groups and multiple environments, getting data for each one of those would take multiple platform API calls. And this might mean that you might hit the 429, which is the you've exhausted your API limits. So what you can do in that case is that you can limit the number of business groups you want to bring data from or the number of environments. So you can say, okay, I'm only interested in non-production for now, or only interested in production. You can use different schedulers to sort of with different cron expressions to for different business groups. So for example, if you have like huge number of more than 25, then you can say, okay, we're going to do 10 business groups in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, 10 in the evening, something like that. So it staggers those calls, and then you don't end up making all of those API calls at once, and then you should be able to avoid the rate limiting concerns. As I mentioned, the platform user that you use for Metrics Toolkit to call those platform APIs, it requires org admin access. This is because, for example, if you go into access management at the moment, you're not able to see all the number of users or different environments and things like that if you don't have org admin access. So if you want the full picture, you do need the org admin access. You may decide to go by connected app approach. It does have a limited set of permission that it would ask for. They are also listed on the GitHub page, so you can check those out. But it does mean that you might lose out on some of those metrics because it doesn't have access to the information that it needs. For example, you might lose out on API analytics, which is the transaction in last 30 days and things like that. So I guess there's a balance between how many permissions you want to give to the user and the kind of data you want to get back. Again, there are ways to encrypt those credentials and things like that to manage them through a vault and things like that. So you can implement those additional security measures, but there's a trade-off, so you can figure that out. And in large-scale accounts, if you have a huge amount of metrics data coming back, you might not want to load it all at once into Splunk, for example, or whatever visualization option you choose. In that case, you might want to have a middle layer, which would be a database or a data store, where you basically park all of that metrics data before you put it into the visualization system. So there's also a good pattern. It kind of decouples the responsibility and also lightens the API calls that you would need to make. You can just have it update the database every now and then you can just read from the database whenever you are looking at the dashboards and things like that. Okay, so without further ado, I will show you some dashboards. So first of all, I wanted to show you the GitHub page. So that's the Metrics Toolkit. And as I said, there's a lot of documentation on this page. It goes into great detail. And everything that I covered today, it's basically all listed here as well. So you can go in and have a read and understand sort of how this works, different loader options, etc. All the available metrics and what are the dimensions. So some of those are per business group. Where applicable, they're also per environment. So you can sort of have that division and sort of drill down into those on your dashboards. We'll see how that works on the actual dashboard. But again, and then there's also installation requirements. So sort of what you need, what runtime it is, and the kind of you can see the scopes that's required for each of those different components, and then finally the steps to basically run the application. There's also good amount of documentation around each of those properties that you would need to configure and where to get those, what it means for you, and things like that. Next, I'll show you some dashboards that I have created on Splunk. So what I've got is a metrics framework or metrics accelerator or metrics toolkit. All of these mean the same thing, by the way. I have it deployed and running in one of my instances, and it's basically collecting information from the MuleSoft customer success organization that I'm part of, and it is displaying data across different sort of dashboards for that particular organization. So as you can see, these are the sort of pre-built dashboards. So you have these dashboards as part of the source code. As long as you just connect it to your Splunk instance, it should be able to load these dashboards as it is, and then you also have the option to sort of go in and edit these dashboards. So if you want to convert some pie chart into a bar graph or something like that, then you have the option of doing those kind of modifications. So I've just got some of these open. This is the consolidated. So this kind of consolidates the platform metrics from all the different components. So you have Exchange, you have API Analytics, API Manager, Runtime Manager, Design Center, and everything. So as you can see, I can see the number of assets by type, number of Design Center projects, how many of those are API specs versus fragments, how many times the fragment is imported by an API spec. So these are the kind of things you would be interested if you're trying to track the reuse, how well your API specs are being reused, how well your API fragments are being reused, or generally the collaborations that should happen as part of the exchange between different teams. There's some good measures around that. Again, the information is there, so you can sort of interpret it in a way you would like across different things. So, for example, there's how many times an API spec is implemented by an application, how many times an extension is implemented. Extension is also another name for MuleSoft connector. And if you are tracking, for example, internally, how much, rating each of those API specs or exchange assets is getting, then you can see that here as well. API manager, number of APIs, how many of those are active versus inactive, with policies, without policies, how many of those have actually secure policies versus insecure policies, not insecure, sorry, without secure policies, number of vehicles available. And as I mentioned, there's also a way to sort of find out what are the different runtime versions being used, number of applications deployed to your runtime manager, and how many of those are started versus stopped. So this was kind of across all of the different components. Then if I go to specific ones, and this is about Exchange. Some of these are obviously you saw on the previous page, but then this is also showing the timeline for it. And as you can see, you can track it across different business groups. So here I've got all business groups, but then I can go, for example, only child org and remove all, and then it should be able to give me the data for that particular one. Or then I can just change it back to this, and it gives me all of the business groups. And you can see, like, for example, average reuse. So the number is obviously the snapshot of whenever this data was collected latest, but you can also then create the time series out of it and sort of track how that number looks like over different, projects that you do or different initiatives that you have, and how that impacts that reuse number as well, and things like that. So it would be an important one to track. What's the next one? Access management. So this is around how many business groups you've had, number of users in active in last 60 days, inactive versus active, and then a timeline of those across business groups as well. Environments, and number of client applications that you have registered with your access management. This is on API Manager. So you can see how many transactions or requests you've had in the last 30 days. What was the timeline for that like? Number of APIs, active versus inactive. This is also a very important measure, number of APIs with more than one contract. So that tells you how many times this API is being used by multiple users. Versus this one is APIs with one or more contracts. So it's like, this is at least one contract, and this one is like more than one contract. So I guess a good distinction between those two. What are the policies being used across your applications? How many of those APIs are without policies versus how many of those are with policies, and the timeline for those as well. Platform benefits. This might be of interest to some of you. 1,000% developer productivity, very productive, the org I'm working in. But obviously, these numbers would look much more believable in your case. And for example, these are all dollar values. So again, this is a demo environment, arbitrary numbers, but for your case, it should be a little bit more, correlating to how you're working and how you're using the platform. And you can also track this across the time series. So that should give you a little bit more indication on how that number gets impacted. As you, for example, the first project you do, that might not be too much savings because you will be building everything from scratch. But the next one you build, you will be using some of those APIs, system APIs, for example, some of the process APIs that you might have would be reused. And in that case, you'll be able to see that total amount of savings going up. And if it doesn't go up, then that's also something you can discuss with your team, why that went wrong, why we are not seeing this number grow up, or why is this at a plateau. And so those are the conversation starters that you would want to have from these dashboards. This is the runtime manager. So if you are using CloudTub, you'll be able to see the number of echoes, the different runtime versions being used across your application, and also the number of applications you have started versus stopped. All of that can be sort of put on the timeline as well. This is around networking, so how many VPCs, how many VPNs you have available, and DLBs and static IPs and things like that. Again, this is more from a master perspective, so if you're keeping track of how many you have available and what your next project needs, and sort of help with the forecasting and planning a bit as well, to have this information available. This one is the runtime manager standalone. So if you're using on-prem servers, you can see the number of servers you've got, number of runtime versions, number of clusters and server groups, and also the applications across those. So hopefully this gave you a little bit more insight into what those metrics could look like and how you can visualize them, and whether this would make this would give you enough value or not around having those conversations. So I hope that was helpful. Any questions on the dashboard? Are the time series dashboards available out of the box? Yes. So this time series is available. Obviously, you won't see any data once you first start collecting, but after you've done like maybe a month's worth of data, you should be able to see that go through. I don't know if they are by default showing that monthly or something. I think Splunk would auto adjust based on the amount of data it has available, and then it will show you either whatever is available for a month or 3 months and things like that. But you can adjust the frequency, so it can go time range, whatever you choose, and then you should be able to sort of filter based on that as well. But yes, the dashboards are available out of the box. Thank you for your question. Any other questions? Is this something that sort of helped you in I guess, what you wanted to understand from measuring KPIs? And do you think Metrics Toolkit would do the job for you? I'm very interested to sort of know what this means for you. If you would like to ask any questions or just come off mute and talk, let me know. I can sort of give you access to turn your mic on. Anthony, that's a very good question. We get asked this a lot, and believe me, we have put this across to product as an idea to include as part of the endpoint monitoring, so that we don't have to do this as a separate exercise. But I guess there are requirements, because endpoint monitoring does focus largely on the application level metrics. So if you go into endpoint monitoring, there's like the CPU, the memory utilization, the number of messages per application, whereas what we just talked about today is more at the platform level or at the very high level. So there are different, I guess, categories of metrics, but it has been given as a suggestion that this should essentially be part of the MuleSoft product. So yes, agree with you. Yes, thanks, Alvi. I'm glad you found this useful. And to everyone else, if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out or just post them in the chat for now. I will talk very briefly about, I guess, how you can extend the framework, and I guess what are the other steps you can do. The application has a modular design structure with separated collectors, loaders, and aggregators, and things like that. So it's a very modularized. You should be able to sort of navigate your way around the source code very easily. It's very simple to extend, and as you can see, like, all of the code is available to you, so you can go in and understand how it works, and then sort of modify it to sort of pick and choose the things you want, and I guess remove the things you're not interested in. You are allowed to make those extensions as you need. You can also request, if you find any bug, for example, you can just post as a normal open source GitHub project. You can just raise an issue on the GitHub project, and they will address it. I do have to mention, though, that this is not supported through MuleSoft support because it's not technically part of the product. But if you are sort of stuck and if you need some help, customer success is always happy to help you. So you can reach out to us through your customer success manager, and they will be able to put you in touch with someone who can help you out with the technical parts. But yeah, we are keen to sort of help you use this in the best way possible. And we are more than happy to get your feedback on what works and what doesn't work as well. So feel free to sort of have that criticism as well, send our way. If you wanted to add any other external systems that are not already part of this, so for example, Azure DevOps or something like that, there is a framework around how you can create this. There's instructions, I think, on the GitHub page as well. But if not, then it's fairly easy. You just copy what's already there for the available systems, and then you can replicate the same information, same logic for the applications you need. This might look a little bit old, by the way. The screenshots are fairly old, but it has been updated, and I believe the application was like latest release was last week or last month or something. So fairly recent updates being happening. So you would have the latest on that. Finally, that's the GitHub page. If you feel inclined to check it out and let us know how you go with it. We're pretty much on time, so I'll talk about giveaways. We don't really have a quiz for you today, but if you are interested in a training voucher, you can get this for installing the Metrics Toolkit. So if you install the toolkit and you create a dashboard for your company's any.org, and if you send me a screenshot, I will get the first 3 emails to receive the training vouchers. Get them to receive the training vouchers. If you have any questions around this, on how this works or how you would want to do this, feel free to email me. My email's on the screen. And any other questions you have, if you get stuck in your implementation or if you don't think it works as expected or anything like that, do let us know and we'll be more than happy to help you out. With that, I really hope you found this useful, and I hope that you would try and install this and get some value out of it. But if not, if no other questions, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And thanks for joining. Thank you. Thank you. I really do like talking about Metrics Toolkit, so I will go on as much as I can. But I hope that's beneficial to you all as well. And great to see you all here. Cheers. Thanks, Aditya. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Albi, Benedict. Thanks, Ravi, Adi, and Dinesh.